he came over almost a slightly weak person, but he just absolutely uncaring, and no, he refused to show any emotion about the terrible scenes that were in Aleppo at the time.
Syria is on the brink now of what? A prosperous future as a united country or more civil war? We're kind of crying out for experts to give us analysis, and there's none better than the Sunday Times' foreign correspondent Christina Lamb. She met the former President Bashar al-Assad back in 2016. We can speak to her now. Good morning, Christina.
Good morning.
Before we get to where Syria is right now, just tell us what it was like meeting Assad. What did you make of him as a man?
Sure. Well, I was there when his forces were absolutely pounding Aleppo, horrific scenes. And when I went to meet him, I have to say he was deeply unimpressive, actually, but also deeply unapologetic. He really seemed to have no interest in what he was doing to his own people. And he was a sort of quietly spoken person. I met him in that palace that we're seeing lots of people going in and looting. I didn't get a tour. I was only was in a couple of rooms. There was a lot of art, marble floors. It wasn't, I have to say, that lavish from what I could see, but I didn't get to see the garage with all the supercars.
Yeah. Did he seem? I'm interested in that. He seemed sort of slightly mediocre and out of his depth. Did he seem cruel or just unheeding? Like he didn't care about the abuse that was done on his orders and in his name, or did you get a sense of? I mean, he's a sadist at one level, but at a vast level, really. What that side of him? Did you get any sense of that?
Yes, I mean, when you look at the numbers of people that were killed in the last 13, 14 years of his regime, we're talking about more than 500,000 people. Clearly, you know, those levels involve somebody that really just doesn't care about their own people. And that was the main sense I had. Not, I can't say he came over as incredibly cruel. As I said, he came over almost a slightly weak person, but he just absolutely uncaring, and no, he refused to show any emotion about the terrible scenes that were in Aleppo at the time. And he said, you know, I'm fighting terrorism and the West should sort of thank me. And at that time, you know, his position was still very much in question, but he said the West is going to have to learn to live with me. And, you know, in fact, he was right for the next 8 years.
He was. How much did you get a sense he was controlled by Iran? Because that's the other thing, this mediocrity that you describe. How much was he his own man, or did you feel, do you believe from other analysis you've done that he was the sort of being manipulated by Iran?
I don't know about being manipulated, but he certainly wouldn't have survived if it hadn't been for the help from Iran and, of course, the air support from Russia, which had only that the Russians had really started doing that just the year before, because there was a time, you know, a couple of years before I interviewed him, where he really looked like he was on the way out. He wouldn't, you know, people were predicting he wouldn't survive much longer, but then he had Iranian forces helping him, and Russian, I saw Wagner Force people there on the ground in Aleppo, but he also had their air power.
That's so interesting. Did you meet his wife? Did you meet the British-born Asma al-Assad?
No, she wasn't there. I didn't meet her.
She's an interesting character to many people. So where are we with Syria now? If we look at the different forces at play, you've got HTS, Kurdish forces, Islamic State, Israel is striking sites, Turkey's very involved in all of this. Can you plot a map towards Syria as a unified country that in which its civilians can be safe, or does that feel a long way away still?
Yeah, I mean, so as a Syrian Kurdish friend of mine said to me a couple of days ago, this is a time to celebrate. But, you know, after that, because at the end of the Assads after 54 years and all the cruelty and death, of course, it's got to be a good thing. But what happens next is a huge question. As you say, it's super complicated. There's so many different people involved, foreign actors, but also within Syria itself. One of the big problems after the uprising started in 2011 was the opposition were never united. I know it was, for a while, I was based in Washington during the Obama years, and they were trying to kind of come up with a united Syrian opposition they could work with. And whoever you met saying that they were Syrian opposition would then say, oh, those other people that were here last week were not Syrian opposition.
Yeah.
It was almost sort of like, Monty Python. So that's what's been incredible the last couple of weeks, seeing them all come together like this. But of course, the big fear is that the leading group in this incredible takeover has been HTS, who we used to know as Nusra Front, which is a jihadist group led by al-Jolani, although I believe he's now taken back his original name, which is Bashar. And I was with Taliban yesterday in Doha, and they were saying he's one of us. It's the same kind of group, that they're not interested in any kind of international actions. They're nationalist groups, but they're jihadists. They want an Islamic regime.
And that's so interesting you say that, because the parallel we were trying to draw yesterday was with the Taliban, because when the Taliban retook control of Afghanistan, they talked a bit of a good game for a while, and then it became a very, very hardcore Islamist society underneath their rule. I guess that's a danger. Syria is a very pluralistic country, or at least in intent for many people. That would be a fear that that HTS do a Taliban. Is that a legitimate thing to worry about?
Yeah, I think it is absolutely a legitimate thing to worry about. Because, as you were saying, when the Taliban first took over in August 2021, people were talking about them as Taliban 2.0, that they weren't the same as the Taliban before, that they were much more moderate and open to the outside world. We haven't seen that at all. It's almost been the opposite. You could argue they're certainly as bad, if not worse, for women as the previous Taliban. So that is a huge fear. And so when you hear the Taliban saying, well, he's one of us, that's also alarming. But, there were many other people involved in this move to remove Assad. And lots of those groups are absolutely not jihadists. They're nationalists, they're Democrats. Syria, was a sophisticated country. So I think there would be a lot of people that would resist any attempts to sort of try and take the country back in time in the way that the Taliban has done.
It's so interesting, Christina. It's great. It's really lucky for us to speak to you. You've told us things we didn't know beforehand. So thank you so much for taking the time.
It's a pleasure. Thank you.
That's Christina Lamb there, the Sunday Times' foreign correspondent. Not only met Assad, but talks to the Taliban. And we yesterday we mentioned that a couple of people said, oh, it's nothing like the Taliban. But it's interesting when Christina Lamb says the Taliban says that al-Jolani is one of us. Yeah. It makes you think, doesn't it?
It certainly does. And also, you always think about, I was thinking about it yesterday in relation to women as well. That's kind of how you judge many countries.